What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I will continue my conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. Hope you're enjoying this conversation. I hope you're taking it all in. Boxing is not new. It's been around since 1681. And when you look at boxing, for what it truly is, it's about two men trying to understand one another, trying to get past the circumstances, the confrontations, the facades, the dilemmas. Two objects trying to force or impose their characteristic views on one another. Boxing is life. And in life, you take things as they come, but you prepare for the unexpected. We're going to be looking at 1940, January 24th to be exact. 140-pound, 30-year-old Henry Armstrong knocks out 25-year-old, 144-pound Pedro Martinez. 47 seconds in the ninth round, New York's Madison Square Garden. The referee was Billy Carver. He would stop the contest in front of 19,157 spectators. They would collectively pay $59,575. Armstrong came into the ring with a record of 105 wins, 13 losses, 7 draws, and 79 knockouts. Pedro Martinez came into the ring with a record of 91 wins, 6 losses, 4 draws, and 51 knockouts. Pedro Martinez was from Puerto Rico. He was born April 24th, 1914, and he died June 26, 1996, in Puerto Rico. I had the pleasure of meeting Pedro Martinez. He stood 5 foot 5 inches. He was a lightweight with a 68-inch reach and had a record of 103 total bouts, 91 wins, 8 losses, 51 knockouts, and he was stopped twice, 4 from 1931 and 1940. He was in the ring with fighters such as Lou Ambers, who he would lose to, Henry Armstrong, who he would lose to. Two great fighters on his resume. January 29, 1940, Tony Zale defeats Al Hastack, the new NBA New York SAC middleweight champion. It was a non-title bout. Tony Zale's name was Anthony Florian Zaleski. He was born May 29, 1913 in Gary, Indiana. He would die March 20th, 1997 in Chicago, Illinois. I had the pleasure of meeting Tony Zale. He stood 5 foot 7.5 inches. He was a middleweight with a 69-inch reach and had a record of 87 total bouts, 67 wins, 18 losses, 45 knockouts. He was stopped 5 times himself, 4 from 1934 to 1948. Pretty decent fighter was Tony Zale. The only issue I had with him, he did not give black fighters the fair opportunities that they deserve. You can look it up yourself. This is the reason why anything you do in life, you leave a paper trail. You create an asterisk to your name. February 9th, 1940. Joe Louis defeats Chilean heavyweight Arturo Godoy, 15 rounds, unanimous decision in New York, Madison Square Garden. The referee was Arthur Donovan. 15,567 spectators paid collectively $74,988.27. It was on a Friday night. Joe Louis was 25 years old. He stood 6 foot 1.5 inches, weighed 203 pounds, and had a 76-inch reach. Had a record of 40 wins, 1 loss, 34 knockouts, just to be clear. And he earned $32,848.81. Arturo Godoy was 27 years old. He stood 6 foot 1.5 inches, weighed 202 pounds, had a 74-inch reach. He had a record of 54 wins, 10 losses, 7 draws, and 31 knockouts. He was paid $13,450.10 in his bout with Joe Louis. Arturo Godoy was born October 10th, 1912 in Chile. He died December 21st, 1930. He was 73 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Chile. Fought from 1930 to 1951. Had a total bout career of 127 bouts, 91 wins, 22 losses, 51 knockouts, and he was stopped 3 times himself. He was in the ring with fighters such as Turkey Thompson, Buddy Knox, Leonard Marrow, Alabama Kid, Maynard Jones, Elkin Brothers, Howard Johnson, and Cyclone Williams. He was also in the ring with Billy Jones and Tommy Laughlin, Buddy Walker, Roscoe Tallis. Pretty good fighter was Arturo Godoy, but he couldn't handle Joe Louis, and he would foul Joe Louis many times. He used to crouch when he fought. Check out Arturo Godoy. He was something else. April 26, 1940, World Welterweight Champion, Homicide Hank, Henry Armstrong, knocks out Paul Jr., Boston, Massachusetts, in 7 rounds. It was in defense of his World Welterweight Championship title. They fought at the Boston Garden. Now, the referee was Johnny Martin. Johnny Martin would stop the contest 2 minutes and 39 seconds in the 3rd round when they fought June 21st in 1940. But when he fought April 26, 1940, he would stop the contest 1 minute and 7 seconds of the 7th round. Paul Jr., his name was Paul Labby Jr., he was born July 27, 1907 in Quebec, Canada. He died November 28, 1995. He was 88 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Lewiston, Maine. I met Paul Jr. I did. He fought between 1928 and 1940, had a record of 159 wins, 23 losses, 16 draws, and 58 knockouts. Between April 26, 1940 and June 21, 1940, he was stopped 1 minute and 5 seconds in the 7th round and 2 minutes and 39 seconds in the 3rd round against Henry Armstrong for the World Welterweight Championship title. He would lose to Albert Chalky Wright in the 5th round, KO'd August 12, 1940, Philadelphia at the Gardens. And he fought Bernie Miller, 6-Second Powell, and Pete Herman. 6-Second Powell fought from 1926 to 1945. He had a total bout career of 75 bouts, won 38 of them, lost 27 of them. Had 9 draws and 16 knockouts. He was a welterweight, Plainsfield, New Jersey. He was born April 19, 1910, and he died May 14, 1988. He was 78 years of age at the time of his death. That's 6-Second Powell. May 10, 1940, lightweight champion Lou Ambers was knocked out after being dropped 3 times in the 3rd round in New York. He was stopped by Lou Jenkins. Ambers stood 5 foot 6 inches, weighed 131 to 140 pounds. He was in the ring with Tony Canzaneri and Davey Day, Sammy Fuller and Al Barmy Davis, Baby Arizmenzi and Henry Armstrong. Lou Jenkins was 5 foot 7 inches, weighed 125 to 144 pounds. He was in the ring with Lou Jenkins. Now, who was Lou Jenkins? His name was Verlin Elman Jenkins. He was born December 4th, 1916 in Melbourne, Texas. He died October 30th, 1981 in Oakland, California. He was in the ring with fighters such as Willie Joyce, 1 draw and 2 wins. Mike Belois, 8-round technical knockout. Tibby Larkin knocked him out in 1 round. Lou Ambers stopped him in 3 rounds for the World Lightweight Championship title. He was in the ring with Wesley Ramsey and Bob Montgomery, Fritzy Zivic and Freddie Ray Cochrane, Sammy Angot, and Marty Servo. He would lose to Servo in 10 rounds and lose to Angot in 15 rounds. Lose to Freddie Ray Cochrane in 10 rounds. Draw with Fritzy Zivic in 10 rounds. Lose to Bob Montgomery in 10 rounds. And lose to Wesley Ramsey in 10 rounds. But he was a good fighter, very good contender in his day. May 20th, 1940, bantamweight Harry Jeffer defeats Joey Archibald in 15 rounds in Baltimore, Maryland, to become the world featherweight champion. Thursday, May 23rd, 1940, middleweight Ken Overland would defeat Severino Garcia to become the middleweight champion in 15 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden. The referee was Arthur Donovan. The judge, Steve Hamas. Steve Hamas was a heavyweight who used to step on the feet of Max Melling when he fought in the 1920s. New York SAC World Middleweight Championship title was on the line. 33-year-old Garcia stood 5 foot 6 inches. He weighed 155 pounds and had a 70-inch reach. Had a record of 115 wins, 25 losses, 13 draws, and 72 knockouts. Ken Overland was 29 years old. He stood 5 foot 9 inches, weighed 159 pounds, and had a 70-inch reach. Had a record of 109 wins, 17 losses, 6 draws, and 18 knockouts. Now, Ken Overland, he was born August 15, 1910 in Illinois of Chicago. He died July 24, 1969. He was 58 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Norfolk, Virginia. He fought from 1931 to 1944. Had a total bout career of 167 bouts, 136 wins, 19 losses, 24 knockouts, and 10 draws. He was stopped twice in his career, but Ken Overland was something else. He was the reason, in my opinion, why Henry Armstrong was robbed in 1940 against Severino Garcia. They didn't want Ken Overland facing Henry Armstrong. They didn't think that would be a good match. I believe that Armstrong would have defeated Ken Overland. Although Ken Overland was a very good fighter, very underrated in my opinion, But it was a better match between him and Garcia, and the mob was behind that match as well. Friday night, May 24th, 1940, World Welterweight Champion Henry Armstrong knocks out Ralph Zanelli in 5 rounds in Boston, Massachusetts. It would be in the defense of Henry Armstrong's Welterweight Championship title. 24-year-old Ralph Zanelli stood 5'7.5". He weighed 142 to 147 pounds. He stood 5'7.5". Very good, strong fighter was Ralph Zanelli. He had a record of 107 wins, 13 losses, 8 draws, and 72 knockouts. After Henry Armstrong was 30 years old at the point of this career, he stood 5'5.5", had a 67-inch reach, had a record of 44 wins, 8 losses, 3 draws, and 22 knockouts. Ralph Zanelli, the Ripper, they called him. Seneca Falls. He was born October 2nd, 1915 in Seneca Falls. That's in New York. Died November 29th, 2006. He was 91 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Providence, New York. I met Ralph Zanelli. He fought from 1936 to 1952, had a record of 149 total bouts, 93 wins, 49 losses, and 33 knockouts. He fought Charlie Burley and lost as an amateur. May 24th, 1940, was stopped in 5 rounds, 1 minute and 30 seconds to be exact. Referee Johnny Martin. World Welterweight title, Luther Slugger White. Ray Robinson, July 1st, 1943, lost 10 rounds. Izzy Gennaro. He fought him a few times. Was in the ring with Jimmy Doyle, lost to him. Fizzy Zivic defeated Fizzy Zivic in 10 rounds. Coley Welch lost him in 2 rounds. Trying to remember these things. He was in the ring with Bobby Dykes from Texas. Johnny Bratton. Johnny Bratton was from Chicago. He had brittle hands and a brittle jaw. He would go 9 rounds with Ike Williams with a broken jaw. Did Johnny Bratton. Same thing with Kid Gavilan. But Johnny Bratton was a cutie pie. Reminded me a lot of Ray Robinson in his swag. Used to have slick hair, always wore the best hats and his best suits and shiny shoes. Good with the ladies, but he could fight. He was also in the ring with fighters such as Ike Williams. Ike Williams. I talked about him, and I'll be mentioning him more in this conversation because he turned professional in 1940, as did Ray Robinson and Jimmy Bivens and Willie Pep, as well as Izard Charles. When you look at Jake LaMotta, turned professional, 1940, had his first fight in 1941. Be clear. But he turned professional in 40. That's when he got his license. He just didn't have his first professional fight until 1941. I consider him a 1940s fighter. Cleo Shane and many others turned pro in 1940. All great fighters. June 20th, 1940, Joe Louis knocks out Arturo Godoy in 8 rounds at New York's Yankee Stadium in front of 27,786 spectators. They paid $149,505 to watch this exciting bout. The referee was Billy Cofford. He was stopped about 1 minute and 24 seconds of the 8th round. Now, the 5-1 favorite champion, Joe Louis, would batter Arturo Godoy around the ring. And this was a problem for the State Athletic Commission. They were being investigated for some other bouts that they figured wasn't being officiated properly. And Joe Louis's bouts were being looked at very carefully because the mob was behind a lot of those fights. Joe Louis was knocking out his opponents. Joe Louis didn't have anything to do with the mob in terms of his fights being fixed or anything. But the mobs were always around Joe Louis's fights. They were trying to get some of their fighters in just for a payday. So they wanted to make sure Joe Louis did his job and not hold fighters up, make sure he didn't take it easy on him, make sure he got him out of there because that's what the people paid their money for. So Arturo Godoy was an opportunist, if you will. And he would be in the ring with Joe Louis. Joe Louis took home $59,802. Arturo Godoy earned $26,153.38. And Joe Louis would give opportunities to fighters that were on the list. Now, I'm sure he wanted to fight other fighters, such as Turkey Thompsons and others, Elmer Violent Ray in the world. But he came at a time where he couldn't sit at the negotiation table. He didn't have the finesse to do that as a person, if you will. But he was conscious of opportunities as he can give one because he wanted to pay money to John Henry Lewis out of pocket. John Henry Lewis needed the money. There was issues he was having. And Joe Louis wanted to pay him, but he couldn't get money until he spoke to Mike Jacobs. Mike Jacobs would not allow Joe Louis just to pay him because obviously Mike Jacobs wouldn't get a percentage of that bout. So he had to make it legal. So they found a way to get John Henry Lewis into the ring with Joe Louis because John Henry Lewis was the light heavyweight champion at the time. He already had one of his titles stripped from him because of an eye examination test. So he only had one title. And this was the problem for Mike Jacobs because he had to get John Henry Lewis cleared. So that's why they fought for Joe Louis's other title. One of Joe Louis's titles were not on the line. Very complex case. But Joe Louis went through all that for his friend John Henry Lewis because he had too much respect for him and he understood his situation and or circumstance. And as I look at Joe Louis's life, it makes me understand why a lot of people didn't have the same sympathy for Joe Louis as Joe Louis had for other people. I told you when he fought Max Schmeling in 1938, what Joe Louis actually went through. Not only to pull that fight off, he gave 10% of his purse. Jimmy brought it. But he also lost a lot of things because he gave up so much for that fight. Part of the terms and conditions was Joe Louis didn't have any rights to choose any opponent. He had to give rematches to certain opponents, Buddy Bear and Abe Simon. And the first black fighter he had the opportunity to give a title shot to because he wanted to give title shots to all the black fighters that were there at the time. It was Jersey Joe Walcott. Jimmy Bivens was an exhibition. John Henry Lewis was the only fighter that he would fight, a black fighter. Roscoe Tallis. But it wasn't until Jersey Joe Walcott and Ezzard Charles. One of the credits that I gave Joe Louis was he is the one who put up Ezzard Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott to fight for his title. That was Joe Louis. That was a demand and request that he had back in 1938 and 9. He was able to get John Henry Lewis the shot, but he couldn't get any other fighter until he officially retired and he appointed. Because at that time, when the champion retired, he had the rights to appoint the fighters he wanted to fight for his title. As did Jim Jeffries did with Marvin Hart and Noah Brusso, which is Tommy Burns. As did Gene Tunney did with Jack Sharkey, the Boston Gob, and Tommy Loughran, the Philly Phantom, 1928. As did, well, we already talked about Joe Louis. Rocky Marciano. Rocky Marciano had placed Floyd Patterson and Archie Moore in 1956. He's the one that decided those two men would fight for his title. And so boxing has a rich history. Joe Louis, Henry Armstrong was a great part of that. And we'll continue to pay attention to see what changes were made moving forward. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the museum of the forgotten fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Shout out to the great fighters of the past. If it wasn't for those fighters, wasn't for that time, today's boxing would not exist, clearly. Thanks for listening. Be well. Peace.